Good morning, everyone. I wanted to share this video for those who are getting ready their Tronxy x5s printer but struggle with different issues, as I have. While there are instructions and PDFs and guides and videos, there are small little issues that actually you come across only once you start building it. First thing I messed up was actually screwing on the rubber feet. I screwed them at the wrong edge, basically. So that was a quick fix. I just screwed them off and screwed them on the right side, as you can see right now on top. So that's like a small issue. Only way to realize it is actually by paying attention where are the 2040 beams. They should be up. The same thing actually was here with the X and Y carriages on the side. If you rewind a bit, you can see that I also put them on the wrong beams. You can see me right now loosening all the screws and getting the angles straight and then screwing them back together. I was doing that because once the carriage stopped at one corner, the other corner was moving a bit. So that means that all the beams weren't exactly straight. So I put it on the side and loosened everything and then tightened again. So my carriage would be moving freely and square. Most of these issues could be avoided just by paying attention to the manual or Tronxy video on YouTube. I was very anxious to get it going, so I skipped a lot of instructions in PDF and video. Only started to pay attention to them somewhere mid-build. So there's a lot of things that could be avoided, but many of its instructions aren't exactly clear, and you realize that there's something wrong only when you start to assemble next parts and you have to step back to do something differently, or at some point you run into issues, as you will see later with the x-axis. At this point in build, I'm installing the belts, and they were quite flappy to my liking, so I really made sure that they're really tight. At one point, I just overdid it a bit, and I realized that carriage is moving like really heavily. So I untightened them a bit, so they're still tight, but they're not so loose that steppers might be losing steps because they're too tight. So that's one point that you really have to pay attention. And from the first look, it seems that they're maybe a bit too loose, but as far as I know, belts can never be too loose. Right now I'm doing the holders for the heat bed for the x-axis, and at some point I was worried that I might have to tear them apart and flip them over, because at some point I realized that there's one particular screw hole that's like off to the one side, so that's kind of like responsible for the end stop for the x-axis. But afterwards I realized that it's not a problem, and the end stops for the x-axis and y-axis, you can pretty much screw them on like whatever side you want, so that shouldn't be the issue. However, I managed to over-tighten the Z-axis rods that resulted in slightly bent top beams there, and I couldn't figure out why the head wasn't moving uniformly across the bed. It was like scratching the bed in one place and like millimeters away in the different one. Then I just loosened them and everything came where it should be. Right now you can see me assembling the heat bed. This large heat bed has a trouble of keeping temperature, so I decided to cut a piece of cork board and put it on the underside. I made a mistake by trying to screw it with the nuts and hoping that it will stay in the place, but no, it won't. I still have to redo this, but as I'm not using heat bed very often, actually I'm using it like very rarely, even if with PETG, because in my experience I have never had like real problems with PETG, ABS mostly warping. So I don't use it at I would say I don't use it at all on like 99% of my prints. So that's not the issue for me yet. So I will probably take care of it at some point, but I'm too lazy and too little of a free time to do it right now. As I've noticed on many forums and Reddit and YouTube, people are struggling with PETG. I don't know why, but the real thing for me that changed the experience of printing with PETG is actually finding the right glue stick, because not all glue sticks are made the same. They're kind of like PVA based mostly, but the additives to make it either too soft or some other properties that the manufacturers want to give their glue sticks, so they're not performing equally. My advice is actually going to the hardware store and trying out every kind that there is, and doing so you will find one that works best for you. I have burned through, I don't know, some 6, 7, 8 different kinds, and each of them are performing a little bit different. Like one is really sticking good, but it doesn't last for more than one print. Other one is like really lasting long, but it doesn't perform as well. So there are trade-offs for each of them, and you just have to find your own that works best for you. Every one of us have different machine, different things to print, different materials. So in my opinion, there are no rights or wrongs. It's just like different tastes. So my way of doing things is printing on aluminum bed. I know many have said that no, it's not the right way to do it, but for me it works fine. Your mileage may vary. Try to find the settings that works best for you. When I started out, I realized that one of the problems was not fiddling with settings enough. So at one point, I tried ends of the spectrum. I tried printing with a really hot temperature way outside the recommended temperature for any material, and then trying the other end. So when I realized that there are extremes I can go for, and what happens if I reach those extremes, then I have a sense like what's the range, and trying to find the middle ground between like the speed and the quality and the toughness of the part and any other properties I might want to try. So just experiment a lot, and just be open to different approaches, even ones that by general view aren't so okay, as printing like PETG without heated bed. That's my way of doing it, and it works fine for me. It might not work okay for you. Meanwhile, you can see me assembling the control board, and while idea of having it on the side with the fan and everything looks good on the paper, in reality it's not so neat looking and tidy. After a while I managed to get it looking good, but it still doesn't look as Prusa, maybe. All in all, I don't care for it, as long as it works and works good. So these are the endpoints for Y and Z axis. As you can see, I managed to screw it on the inside, and that was a mistake because the screw on the carriage is outside. So after trying to home in on it, I realized that, well, I have to screw it on the outside. So comes the wire wrap. The one that comes with the kit isn't the most easy to work with. It's quite stiff, but still I managed to get it working. At some point I was thinking that maybe easier would be doing it with a nylon sheet, but I didn't have any with me on the time, so I stick with the one that was given with the kit. One of the issues I stumbled across when I started printing was that the belts were a bit too flappy for my liking. So I decided to tighten them again, and yes, I overdid them. While I didn't have time to do it once again, I left the printer for a day and a half, and when I returned, they were okay-ish, and after running a few prints, they were more than good. So I left it as it is. At this point, you can see me disassembling the power supply. Well, the most people wouldn't want to do it. I was okay because I wanted to tweak the output voltage and just to see what kind of wires there were. So I set the power supply for 13.8 volts just to warm a bit faster, and while doing so I realized that the cables weren't the size that they should be. My advice for everyone who has this printer is to change the wires for bigger ones. While it's okay-ish to run them, if you're running with a high heat bed on long prints and not being constantly there, that could be a safety issue. Apart from that, there's nothing wrong with the power supply. It's ordinary Chinese power supply, so it's good. As this is my first experience with the Bowden style extruders, I didn't know that actually you have to press the tube in the hot end like really hard to get it to the end of the channel, as it's partially working as a liner too. And it caused quite a lot of headache in first prints because I didn't understand why the hell it was acting the way it was. I don't know. So here comes the first start. This is the first homing, and you can see me having a problem right there. In the evening, after the work, I screwed it off and put it on the other side, and now it should be working okay. And there you go. Everything's working good. And now comes the least interesting part, the bed leveling. And after some time of getting the bed leveled, I was finally ready to get something printed. And no, it didn't turn out okay. After some 2 or 3 tries, I managed to get the printer working, and straight away I realized that the fan blowing on the cold side of the hot end is also blowing on the hot end itself, and that's quite apparent that the temperatures are fluctuating and they're not very stable, and it's partly blowing on the part itself too, so that's a problem if you're printing ABS, let's say with PLA or PETG. So I'll put the link in description for a part that does this job well. And meanwhile, I'm designing a part for side blower because I'm currently running without any part cooling. It isn't a big issue for me, but I know that there aren't any side blowers for x5s on Thingiverse. So once I'll finish designing it and printing it, I'll make an episode about it and put the link there so you can use it too. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you liked it. I'll try to do semi-regular updates about projects that are going on, and there will be a few interesting things in near future. I'll have to finish ongoing projects that there will be also a few videos about them. Until then, thank you and goodbye.